Before leaving for Scotland a few moments ago, Mr. Trump left a trail of confusion in his wake. In the space of 24 hours, he gave two strikingly different versions of his relationship with the Prime Minister and of the future of US-UK trade.
One version, the tough one, came in his interview with The Sun newspaper. But as those comments were playing out across Britain, Mr. Trump then took part in a press conference with Mrs. May, which can only be described as damage control. Have a look at the two Mr. Trumps.
I would have done it much differently. I actually told Theresa May how to do it, but she didn't agree with it. She didn't listen to me. This incredible woman right here is doing a fantastic job, a great job. And I mean that. Well, if they do a deal like that, it will most likely, because we'll be dealing with the European Union instead of dealing with the UK. So it will probably kill the deal with, if they do that, their trade deal with the US will probably not be made. The United States looks forward to finalizing a great bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom. This is an incredible opportunity for our two countries, and we will seize it fully.
So you would be prepared to walk away if they didn't give you the right terms?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's going on is very unfortunate. No, well, you can't walk away, because if she walks away, that means she's stuck. Can't walk.
Confused? Yes, perhaps. Joining us now to make sense of it is Susan Page. She's the Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today. Susan, thanks very much for coming in. We have got used now to hearing Donald Trump say one thing and then the next day say something rather different. When we hear something like that, which is the Donald Trump that we should believe?
Yes. I mean, the problem is that it's not that he walked back something a little ways. It's like in one situation he says the precise reverse of what he says hours later in forms where he's being recorded both times. And yet the second time around just denies that he said what he said the first time around. I think probably, we know that President Trump is uncomfortable with kind of personal confrontation. If he's sitting here with you, he's very cordial, he can be charming. But when he's not sitting next to you, when he's tweeting about you, or when he's discussing you in an interview with somebody else, that I think is more likely to be his actual views on what he thinks of you.
So he's more likely to think that Theresa May has not handled the Brexit negotiations well, she didn't follow his advice, and that she should walk away, which is what he had suggested in that interview. Where does that leave foreign leaders trying to do business with Mr. Trump?
It leaves them in an impossible situation. I think. Do you
make nice? Do you not make nice?
That's right. Do you flatter him, and does that serve your long-term interests or not? Because we've seen that the foreign leaders who have had the most successful relationships with him are strong leaders, strongman leaders. It's Kim and it's Xi, and perhaps it will be Putin after the meeting, after the summit on Sunday. And I think allied leaders, our traditional friends, have had a very hard time figuring out how it is you deal with this unpredictable American president.
I've got news for both of you, news that will strike fear into Theresa May. I've been told that his plane has taken off late from Stansted Airport because he's doing an interview with Piers Morgan, another interview. The interview he did with Tom Newton-Dunn, the political editor of The Sun, Susan, he then said was fake news. But of course his difficulty when he blames fake news is that often now people record him.
Well, of course, it's one thing if he's calling fake news something that is based on anonymous sources, because then I think it is possible to raise concerns about how true it is or who was actually talking to reporters. But when the newspaper posted the audio of the entire interview with President Trump, I think it makes it much more difficult for him to portray that as being something he didn't really say or that he didn't really mean.
And of course, again, in the press conference, if you do a fact check on what he's telling us, there's so many falsehoods, so much fake news that he is giving out there. Again, he went back to this idea that the Americans are funding 90% of NATO, that European leaders are about to go well over the 2%. And the European leaders have said, no, we're not. We've recommitted to what we've already committed to.
Yes, and this is one way in which President Trump is different from his predecessors, because in the past, when a president would sometimes say something that was factually incorrect, President Reagan used to do that all the time. But if he got fact-checked in a way that showed definitively that his comment was incorrect, he would either correct it or just at least not repeat it. I think this is the first time we've had a president who will repeat over and over again information that is demonstrably inaccurate.
Susan, you've been covering American politics and American foreign relations for a while. When you look back at the last 48 hours, 3 days of his trip to Brussels and then to the UK, in the president's terms, has this been a successful trip?
I'm sure the president will portray this as being a successful trip. And in terms of his general approach to the world, which is an America first approach to the world, it has not so much regard for the traditional alliances that have kept the peace or kept us aligned with our two countries aligned with each other since World War II. I think in that way it's served his interest. But in terms of what comes next, what's his vision for what replaces a world in which we've relied on good relations with Great Britain and with Canada and with France and with Germany? What's the structure that succeeds that? And we've never heard, I think, an explanation of that. So those who are not aligned with President Trump, I think, would look at this trip with some concern about how it's shaked the foundation of a structure that has served us pretty well for decades.
On something like the narrow issue of Britain's trading relationship with the US, which he raised, of course, during that interview, do you think Mr. Trump went into an interview like that with a strategy and a clear understanding of the political ramifications of what he is saying about Theresa May's Brexit policy and the kind of trouble that might get her into? Is that deliberate? Is he trying to put pressure on her?
You know, I think often he doesn't have a deliberate, thought-out, strategic plan when he goes into an interview like that. He answers the question and he responds with how he feels at the moment. So I think it reflects his true feelings. But I'm not sure I think it reflects, I'm going to say this, that will have this consequence, and then this will happen. I think that has not been his practice in the past when you watch the way President Trump operates.
Okay, Susan Page, thanks very much for
Thank you.
Okay, let's check in with the BBC's Tom Burridge, who is covering protests in Trafalgar Square for us. Now that Donald Trump has actually left London, I'm assuming that some of those protesters are starting to go home at the end of a long day out there. What's it been like there today, Tom?
It's been a pretty extraordinary political day, Katya, but it's also, I think, been quite an extraordinary demonstration. Certainly the biggest demonstration I've been at in London since that demonstration against Britain's involvement in the Iraq War, and that was back in 2004. The stage is coming down, the rain is coming down too, several thousand people sticking it out, but this was absolutely packed out Trafalgar Square earlier on for a rally. So let's bring in a couple of people who've been at the demonstration all day, Sonia and Zan. What do you think was the sort of main message coming from people today about Donald Trump?
I think there was anger that he's here, anger about his racist and his sexist and his bigoted policies, anger at our government for just giving him the red carpet, and anger at our politicians for not speaking out against him and having a bit of a backbone to speak up, because we know that his politics has no place in this country, and most of the British public are very angry to see him here and angry to be seeing him on the big stage. And
I mean, people who like him though do say that he's unconventional. You know, he speaks his mind, and some people really sort of relate to that because, you know, people are generally turned off by politics in the West.
Of course, everyone's going to speak their mind as a politician, but some of the things, I mean, Trump crosses a line in every possible way, and that's another thing that we're here to say. But it's not only about coming out here to show anger, it's also coming out here to show unity. I mean, there were, like you said just now, there were several thousand people out here, there's still several thousand people out here showing unity in the face of the policies that Trump represents. We're here to say that, no, we don't stand for it. Yes, we're angry, but we're also united in the face of the repressive policies that we think Trump represents.
So do you think that you're actually going to achieve anything today? I mean, even if Donald Trump watches some of the images of the protests, and we don't know he will, but even if he does, won't it just energise him further to keep going with his politics, the type of politics he likes to do?
Well, I think it's important today that we send a message to our politicians in the UK that if we look at the crowd that came out today, there is anger. There is anger at the policies that he represents. And also to send a message to our government that there's certain policies, like the way that they treat migrants, with women's rights, with reproductive rights, that our government has in a way been complicit with supporting. So this is a message not just to Trump, but to our own government, that we want the government to stand up to his racist and sexist, bigoted policies that are putting people's lives at risk.
Yeah. So Zan, I mean, it has been mainly left-wing people here, liberal people. You know, yes, a certain section of British society has flexed its muscles today, but does it really travel beyond that? A lot of people at Britain recognise the fact that, he's the US leader, he was voted in, and Britain is a good ally, so therefore he has to come over here and be given proper treatment by our government.
Look, of course, world leaders are always going to have to make the visits and do the pomp and ceremony. But that doesn't mean we can't come out here and say we don't agree with what you say. That doesn't mean we can't come out here and tell our own government that we don't agree with the supposed special relationship that we're supposed to have with Trump. We are here to send a message to say, yes, Britain might be an ally of the United States, but we are not an ally of Trump. And we are not an ally of the policies he represents. And I think that despite the fact that there's a lot of left-wing people out here who would, like you said, there are a lot of represent themselves as left-wing. I think there's a lot of people who might not be so left-wing across the country who might not be here today, but who would disagree with the policies that Trump represents. Maybe not as vocally as we do right now, but there's definitely a lot of resentment there.
One word, what next?
I want Theresa May to stand up to Trump.
Okay, thanks both. Sonia, Zan. It is clearing out, Katja and Christian, and the rain is coming down, so we need to go and get dry. But some people don't look like they're going anywhere for now anyway.
Tom, thank you very much for that, and thank you to your guests as well. I want to share with you a little interesting fact about the gift that the Prime Minister gave to Donald Trump at the beginning of their meeting today at Chequers. He is the first president in 100 years that has a parent that was born in the UK, Mary Ann MacLeod, who was born on the Isle of Lewis in the Hebrides in 1912. So the Prime Minister gave to him the chart that traces his family line on both sides back 3 generations through the official records and the old parish registers. They'd done their homework. The family line goes back on the paternal side to the birth of President Trump's great-great-great-grandfather, Kenneth MacLeod, born near Stornoway in 1776, the year of the US Declaration of Independence. And if I'd received that, Catty, I would have been pretty chuffed. That is a pretty good gift, and I'd be pretty miffed if I was handing it over to a president who treated me as Donald Trump has treated the Prime Minister.
Yeah, she didn't have the best of treatment, did she, with those headlines matching his family chart. And of course, he did point out the fact during the course of his visit that his mother was born in Scotland and his father, of course, was born in Germany. So he has European heritage on both sides of his family. Interesting picking up on what the young lady was saying there to Tom Burridge, because I had people during the course of the day emailing me saying, is there going to be a Love Actually moment at that press conference at Chequers where Theresa May suddenly turns around and says, we are a great nation of, I guess it would be Jordan Pickford's left wrist, not David Beckham's right foot, but we are a great nation and you can't treat us like this. Of course, she went the diplomatic route. I spoke to an advisor of hers, a former advisor of hers, who said not a chance. She is not going to do what Hugh Grant did in the movie, much though people might like to have seen that. That was not the most diplomatic course for her. So she didn't.